Welcome to the third module on sleep in week 2. Today we'll be discussing your sleep genetics and your chronotype. So if you haven't already figured out what your chronotype is, or you have no idea what I'm talking about in the first place, this module is absolutely critical to watch for certain reasons that you will soon discover. What we're going to cover is what is your chronotype, the perfect routine for each type, why is it more productive to follow your chronotype than your typical entrepreneur, rise and grind mentality and stereotypes, and how lack of sleep affects your DNA. So, what is a chronotype? Based on the genetic makeup of your DNA, we can actually see when your biological clock prefers to fall asleep as well as carry out other circadian rhythm functions such as eating, working, exercising, and socializing. Now, how this is determined is by looking at your PER3 gene. If you have a long PER3 gene, you need at least 7 hours of sleep to feel good, and this includes the lion and the bear. And if you have a short PER3 gene, you're a late riser and you can get by with a lot less sleep. So this includes the dolphin and the wolf. Now, knowing the difference between these two is very important because if let's say you are a wolf, which is the night owl, that is the late to go to bed, late to wake up. If you are a wolf and you try and do a lion schedule, which is the early to go to bed, early to wake up, because this is what's quote unquote popular and this is what the grind mentality kind of produces, this is not going to work out because you are fighting your biological clock, and this will be very unproductive. So if you are trying to wake up at 5 a.m., but you're actually a wolf, your work is not going to be as productive because you guys have different productive peak hours. And like I just said, so certain chronotypes like doing activities at different times of the day. So if we go back to the drawing board, the peak hours for the wolf will be different than the lion chronotype. The wolf will be most productive between, let's say, 12 to 4 p.m. with a second wind around 6 p.m. And the lion will be most productive from awakening, which is around 5 to 12 is when they're most productive. And they usually want to wind down and relax a little bit after 4 p.m. So if you are a wolf and you are trying to do the lion schedule, you're not going to be following your biological clock and your work is going to be less productive. It's not going to be as efficient and you are going to feel more tired, more groggy. And instead of wasting the time to try and be a lion because that's what's cool or that's what's painted in the media, what you should be doing is listening to your body and knowing that you're a wolf, because then when you finally actually do your work hours and you align it with your biological clock, your work is going to be that much better. And discovering your chronotype and sleep genetics. So you can learn your chronotype by analyzing your routines and current preferences or by taking a test online. But it's important to note that when you are taking this test and when you're analyzing your own routines, that chronotypes are often mistaken due to environmental disruptions such as light and eating times. So when it comes to your body and your circadian rhythm and how your body knows what time of day it is, it's taking that in through information, and light and food are really the only two variables for information that our body has. So if you are, let's say you're a bear, which is the chronotype that follows the sun patterns, you're kind of in the middle, you're not super early like the lion and you're not super late like the wolf. Let's say you're a bear, but because you're on your phone before bed or you're working until the very last second and you try and fall asleep, you're taking a lot longer to fall asleep and you think you're a dolphin or you think you're a wolf. But in reality, you're just being disrupted by these other environmental factors. So it's really important to look at your environment, make sure you are making all variables baseline to get a true understanding of what your actual chronotype is. Now, a really good example of this is they took, I think it was around 10 different individuals who had sleep disorders where they thought they were the dolphin, they thought they couldn't sleep at all. They took them camping for 2 weeks, and by day 4 or 3, so very early on, they actually fell back to a bear chronotype because they were camping, they weren't by electronics, they didn't have their laptops, they weren't working, and their body simply fell into their correct biological chronotypes. So what I recommend is testing your environment and testing your sleep routines for a couple days. Try and remove the disruptions. So, 2 hours before your goal bedtime, remove your screens, remove your phones, remove your work, And if you fall asleep pretty quickly, then I think, that would be your chronotype. You would be a bear or a lion. But if you take away screens and it's been like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, it's now midnight, it's now 1 a.m., and you still can't sleep, then that should tell you if you are truly a wolf, a dolphin, or a bear. Now, I recommend everyone taking this quiz. Self-analysis can be important and powerful, but taking this quiz really shows you the answers or the right questions to be asking yourself. And so I will link this down in the description below, but this is where you go to take the quiz. Now, one really cool thing is if you guys post your results in the Facebook group, I think it'd be awesome to actually see how many, actual individuals fall under each category so we can tally them up. I think as entrepreneurs, you guys are a totally different breed. So it'd be very interesting to see, if there is any stereotypes or any categorization that follows entrepreneurs. And I think, posting this in the Facebook group would be great. So once you guys get your results, go on the Facebook group and do #bear, #wolf, whatever you are, and then we can count the hashtags later on and see how many of you guys fall under each category. And the 4 types. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about each one, but now we can go into much greater detail. So the first one is the bear. This is the most popular. This is what most of society falls under. So some characteristics of the bear are your sleep and wake times follow the sun. So during winter and summer, they change a little bit. In the summer, you sleep a little bit less. And then in the winter, you sleep a little bit more. You wake up easily, you fall asleep with no problem. Productivity is best right before noon, and you are prone to a post-lunch dip between 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. It also feels like you guys can never get enough sleep, and you also love to sleep, so you can never have too much. You just wish you could stay in your bed and sleep forever, especially when the conditions are right and the temperature is perfect. And the lion. So the lion likes to rise early. Usually they can wake up without an alarm. You easily wake before dawn, and you're the most productive until noon. So right from when you wake up to around noon is when you're most productive. And lions wind down very early, usually, being in bed and falling asleep by 8, 9, or 10. And you don't really care too much about sleep. It seems almost like a burden. So you like being awake, you like taking on the day, and sleep is essential, obviously, but you don't really care too much about it. And the wolf. So you have a very hard time waking up in the morning. Your natural awake time can be anywhere between 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and you're most productive between 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. You get a natural second wind around 6 p.m. and on, and you enjoy the quiet of the evening. You like to get work done when everyone else is winding down for bed. So you like that silence in the evening time. And the dolphin, which is the most rare. I would say the dolphin and the wolf get the most mistaken. Lots of people fall under the bear or even the wolf, but the dolphin is the one that, a lot of people think they have, but they actually don't. And once you actually take control of your routines and finally put in place the right protocols, the right strategies, and fix your environment, then you'll actually realize that you're not the dolphin, and the amount of people who are actually the dolphin, it falls under like 2 or 3% of the total population. So it's very, very rare. So if you have trouble falling asleep, even with all protocols in place, you may be a dolphin. You are a very light sleeper. You are very sensitive to noise and light. You don't get a lot of sleep due to those sensitivities, and your peak productivity is between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., pretty much right in the middle. Now, with that being said, each type has their own ideal schedule. I'm not going to go over each one of these in detail. I'll leave the screen up for a little bit so you can screenshot it, but I also plan on putting this in the description box below. I'll send another link so you guys can actually look at this in detail. A couple things I want to point out is obviously they all have different wake times, they have different sleep times, and by taking the peak productivity hours for each type, that's when you should do your hardest work blocks. So for the bear, that would be around mid-morning. For the lion, that would be from waking up at 5 a.m. till around noon. For the wolf, that'll be around noon till 4, and then a second wind around 6. And then for the dolphin, it's pretty right in the middle, so around 10 a.m. to 2. These are all of your productive hours, and I recommend putting your hardest work blocks, or the ones that take the most mental energy, during those time windows. And breaking the grind mentality stereotype. This is really important because, like I said earlier, if you are actually a wolf and you're trying to do the lion schedule, that's just not going to work. The amount of work you're going to put out is going to be crap compared to someone who is on their biological chronotype. When you work with your chronotype, you can sleep better at night and feel more energized during the day because you're not fighting your cells, you're not fighting your DNA makeup, you're going along with it. And once you do that, you'll have more energy. You won't feel groggy no matter what you do, during the nighttime or during the morning time. It just feels right. And DNA damage. So this is a great example of what happens when you don't listen to your biological clock or your DNA, genetic makeup. Because again, guys, this isn't like I kind of feel like waking up at this time. Based off your DNA and your genetic makeup, it actually tells you when your cells want to fire off pathways to fire off your circadian rhythm. Alex Becker is a great example. I'm not sure what chronotype he is or if he knows his own chronotype. If he's a dolphin or a lion, his current schedule might work well for him. But I believe in one of his videos, he says that he woke up fairly early, around 3 a.m., which is outrageous. But again, Alex Becker is not human. I'm pretty sure he's a robot or an alien from space. But with that being said, let's say that's not his correct chronotype. He will probably get extensive DNA damage as well as, cognitive impairment, depending how long it goes on for, depending if this is his chronotype or not. In anesthesia, researchers analyzed the impact of night shifts in 49 healthy full-time doctors. Baseline blood was collected from each doctor after 3 consecutive days of adequate sleep. 24 participants were then required to work overnight on site and had an additional blood sample taken on a morning after acute sleep deprivation. The results found that overnight on-site call participants had a lower baseline DNA repair gene expression and an increased number of DNA breaks compared to those who had not completed a night shift. So if Alex Becker, if he's not actually following his chronotype, this is what could be happening. Now, this can start a whole host of issues. Now, when you start damaging the DNA and the repaired genes, this can lead to mutations and genomic instability. So if you look at your cells, if they are getting damaged, thousands of times per day, every day for months, and in each one of your cells you have your DNA strands, if these are getting damaged, tens of thousands of times per day, every day for months and sometimes years, depending on how long that routine is going on for, that DNA or genetic makeup is going to get damaged. And once your DNA or genetic makeup is damaged, it no longer can serve the correct blueprint for cells on how to make, healthy working organs, your nervous system. It doesn't have the blueprint. So imagine making a house with no blueprint. You're going to have definitely some big issues with the plumbing, with the foundation. It's not going to work any longer. And what that leads to in health is you're going to have cancer. It can lead to tumors. It can lead to, memory loss, a whole host of issues that you really don't want, that can all be avoided when you just take care of your body and get a full night's rest and actually listen to what your biological clock wants. And fortunately, your cells have ways of fixing most of these problems. So most of the time, by direct reversal, some DNA damaging chemical reactions can actually be directly undone by enzymes in the cell if you're properly getting your sleep. So everything I just said on this page right here, this will all go away and not happen if you just take care of your sleep and listen to your biological chronotype.